Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of August 12th, 2024. This meeting is being recorded and is available virtually, in person, or even on the telephone. Let's have a roll call of the Board of Directors for forum.
All right, roll call of the board. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Here.
Ted Lyons. Jeff Morgan. Norma Cusick.
Here.
Kevin Baker.
Here.
Jim Rosenfeld.
Here.
Sean Ziller.
Here.
Mark Gramis.
Here.
All right, thank you. We have 7 board members present. That is fun.
Okay, thank you. The information packets were mailed out to the Board of Directors in advance of this meeting. Let's look at the agenda and see if there's any changes, additions, corrections, and a need for executive sessions.
All right, thank you. We have no changes or additions to the board agenda today. However, we do an executive session plan to discuss matters of potential litigation as well as potential property acquisition. 2 matters of potential litigation.
Okay. All right, let's move on then to approval of minutes from the July 22nd, 2024 board meeting. Secretary is not here.
I move they be approved.
Okay,
I second it.
motion made by Linda and seconded by Amir that they be approved as written. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Nay? Okay, got approval. At this time, we open up the floor to public comments. Anybody from the big public that would like to make a statement on items that are not on the agenda?
Hi, Brian. No, thank you. FYI, Brian Chamberlain is out today.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Any other comments from the public? All right, then moving on to action and discussion items. We have one item under finance administration. It is a discussion on the 2025 to 2029 capital plan, preliminary plan presentation. This is the first time we're hearing this, correct?
Yes, it is.
And we did get that distributed in advance. No,
The presentation is
Presentation.
posted on the website and distributed in advance. We do have, for board members that are in attendance today, we have a printout of the draft capital plan, but we do have some changes we know that we need to make. So we're going to redo and mail to everyone a full clean copy. So what you have in paper form today is preliminary draft.
we just relive the schedule that we have.
We're going to go through all of that. Yep. We have a pretty detailed presentation today to go through the Allentown Division capital plan, and we'll also spend a little time on the process side of things as well.
Thank you.
All right, so as I mentioned, we are discussing today the Allentown Division capital plan, and at the next meeting, we will talk about suburban and administration type projects. So again, our focus is on Allentown projects today. To remind everyone and our new board members what how our process works for capital planning and really the approval process for projects. We have a number of different ways that we present projects and seek board approval. This 5-year capital plan is a plan, and through its approval, we are not approving projects. We are really asking for approval of the overall capital program and the approaches. We would have additional authorizations requested during our annual budget process where we have a specific year's worth of capital funding budgeted, as well as at the project level when we're initiating projects at a certain dollar threshold, we bring those to the board for approval individually as well. And then the last bite at the apple in terms of approval is in the financing realm. where if we're going out for project financing through a bond issue or a bank loan or even a Penvest application, that those are other opportunities that we ask for board approval for that specific project or the funding approach for the project. So all of that to say is that we're at step one, which is the planning, conceptual planning process. A little bit on the timeline that we're using this year for the capital planning process. We've been working on preparing the plan for the last couple of months. And today we're presenting the Allentown Division draft plan. We'll present Suburban Division next time around, and that will kick off our 30-day public comment period. That public comment period will go through the end of September. And as you see at the bottom, we expect a number of reviews from, for example, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and County Board of Commissioners. City of Allentown always reviews and provides some comments. And then municipalities that we serve will receive a copy, and it will also be posted on our public website for review. And then we will come back to you in October with an updated plan with any changes and any review of public comments that we get, and ask for approval. And that sort of comes right in line or in parallel with our budget process, which is also kicking off right now. And we'll begin seeing budget presentations in September and October as well. So kind of fits together really nicely. Just a few comments before I turn it over to Chuck, who has a lot of detail to share with you today. To kind of set things off and give a summary, last year's Allentown Division capital plan was roughly $192 million of projects. And this year we're proposing a plan that is significantly higher yet again. Last year was a big increase. This is another big increase, up to $325 million. And some of the drivers for those increases are to be expected. First of all, a main driver is that last year's plan did not include the major projects that are part of the regional sewer plan that we've been working on for the Act 537 plan. We have now incorporated those projects into this year's capital plan. So that's the bulk of the change, but we also see some expansion and better definition around the lead service line replacement program, the PFAS treatment requirements, and a few other things that we'll touch on along the way. Also this year, we're incorporating grant funding where we can. We did that last year as well. We're estimating with this year's plan about 14% of the plan supported by grant funding, and that's to be on the conservative side based on what we know we want to apply for and what we think our chances are of receiving grant funding. We will obviously be as assertive as we can and going after additional grant beyond that amount. And then, as I mentioned, just to close, the regional sewer plan projects are included this year. I just want to make the statement or clarify that the Act 537 plan, when it's finalized and ready for submission and approvals, will include its own financial evaluation and rate projection. So what we've done here is just to incorporate the projects and look at it sort of broadly at impacts in terms of financial impact. But we'll get another chance to review it in a little more detail in a couple of months when that plan is ready for presentation. So with that,
Who just came in?
I believe that was Ted Lyons. Ted, if you're with us, if you could just give us a shout hello. Sure if he's connected yet to audio. All right, so the process that we undertake is primarily in Capital Works with Chuck's leadership, and then we turn it over to Ed for financial review and the deeper look at where the funding is going to come from, and that's how this presentation is laid out as well. And turn it to Chuck.
Okay, thanks, Liesl. So we'll start with city water. This slide presents a list of the annual and recurring projects under city water. We have our annual projects. And then we have a breakdown on the following slide of what that is comprised of. We have the indenture, the annual indenture study improvements. which we are catching up on those improvements, so the funding is decreasing. Our needs are decreasing over the years. That's basically the structural things, lots of concrete work, brickwork, facade, building facades, things pointed out in the annual study. Master plan studies, we're required to do one every 5 years per the lease. So the next water study is in 4 years from now. We did one last year. Tank and reservoir rehab, large diameter valve replacement project, and at the bottom our annual water main replacement projects. Those cost figures assume 2 miles per year of water main to be replaced.
Hey Chuck, are the water main replacements getting any easier because of locations? We start off with the more difficult ones, or is it just a mix?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're all over the place based on the prioritization and demographics. You know, in the interest of environmental equity, we try to make sure that we do some in the lower income neighborhoods. But ultimately it's based on the need, on the prioritization. But we do incorporate numerous factors in the prioritization, including lead, including the presence of lead service lines on the public side. So in answer to your question, I wouldn't say it's necessarily getting easier. And it depends on if we're in a state road or not too. You know, we try to avoid state roads to the extent practical. So this is a breakdown of the annual water projects, all the different areas that are under that umbrella. It's everything from water filtration plant, general improvements. Those are smaller projects, to distribution and collections, annual routine replacement of valves and like brakes, like emergency brakes would be covered under that item. Equipment, reservoir rehab, routine meter replacements, SCADA upgrades, mobile equipment, any PennDOT relocations, and any development-driven upsizing. So this begins a list of the large projects. We have, first off, the cloud-based AMR meter reading system. That's a future project to facilitate a basically kind of like a fixed base metering system without the antenna. It's more like a cellular reporting system for the water meters. Saving a lot of reading time for operations. This project is scheduled to begin planning in 2026. Next off is redundant power. We're currently in design phase of that at the water filtration plant to provide a separate feed from a separate substation. Right now, there's two power feeds to the water plant, but they come from the same substation. So that's an important project in the interest of resiliency and regulatory compliance. PFAS, this project appeared on the capital plan last year. You can see a big ticket item in there for construction, which is scheduled to start in 2026. And we're thinking that this will likely treat the water from Crystal Spring based on we're in the study phase for that right now. And the last project, raw water line and influent channel modifications. This is sort of a retitle project. Last year I had a project on the plan. It was influent channel modifications, and that's to structural improvements to resolve a low velocity problem in the influent channels to the primary sedimentation tanks. The low velocity causes settling of fines, of debris, of grit, whatever, and it's an operation and maintenance headache So this project is to resolve that and also provide for a new raw water line, which is a critical single point of failure. And right now, we're in the study phase of looking at the raw water line, which pumps from the main raw water pumps. It pumps through that line to the primary sedimentation basins. And we think that line is in poor condition. It's a master plan project. We're in the process of doing a condition assessment of that line and putting together conceptual layouts for a new raw water line. Next slide, top of the slide, water meter replacement project. This is a project that will be constructed this year and next year. I'm actually bringing that to the board for authorization at the August 26th meeting to replace a bunch of meters in Allentown that are old or no longer reporting or malfunctioning beyond their service life. Next project, the filter upgrades. As you guys know, that project is in construction right now. It will be finished in 2020, the end of 2026. Next project is Big Lehigh intake upgrades. We call it Big Lehigh. It's the Lehigh River intake, and I don't know how it originally got that name, but we just always call it Big Lehigh. So this is a great project in the interest of resiliency. If the Little Lehigh intake would go down for something like environmental contamination or some sort of malfunction, we would need the Big Lehigh intake to provide the bulk of the water to the plant. And right now there's taste and odor concerns with that source, and also some concerns with the pumps and VFDs. So this project is intended to upgrade the Big Lehigh intake such that we can use it as a secondary source. I mean, we can't use it now as an emergency source. It's just, there's lots of issues with taste and odor, especially based on the season of the year. And the last project here is the lead service line replacement program. This is a big ticket item. As you can see, moving forward, 2025 to 2029, it's a $15 million a year spend. So that project is actually, the bids opened about a little over an hour ago for the cycle one lead project. I don't have the results yet, but anxious to see what that looks like. This is a picture of the Big Lehigh pump station. It's right along the Lehigh. That main building there sits about, I'd say about 30 foot higher than the normal river level. And the picture on the right is the inside. There's 4 large pumps. It's a pretty neat structure. It'd be good to get that upgraded. Here is a very current picture on the right of filter 1 at the plant. The media was demolished, and there's a picture of a barrel taking out the demolished under drain. It's clay under drain material. Picture on the left is the filter drain for rehab. So the picture on the right was taken probably a few weeks ago, I believe, a month ago.
Early last week or late the week
Or that
before?
recently,
Yeah, it's within 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that project is going well, and that project will finish by the end of next year, I believe.
26.
Yeah, 2026, yep. And this one might be a little hard to see but in red is the existing raw water line that I was talking about that we believe is in poor condition. It's a master plan project, and we'd like to construct a new raw water line from the raw water pumping station to the primary sedimentation basins. A conceptual layout that we're evaluating right now is to go underneath the filters. There's like a pipe gallery underneath the filters, and it would be the shortest distance between 2 points, and it would be, we think, very constructive. It would save a lot of money and disturbance because there's a whole lot of things under the ground there, needless to say. So we can run it beneath the filter gallery, that would be best of both worlds. So we're looking at that now. And this will be a construction project in 2026. These are two new projects that were added to the water capital plan. First one is HVAC system upgrades at the water plant. And the second is a roof replacement project at the water plant. Both these are asset management related. The HVAC system project, it's a multi-phase project. Right now, the air conditioning for the admin offices is very poor and basically creates an uncomfortable situation in the hot weather that we've been having. And here's a picture showing that the numbers represent the different phases of this project. So we just brought phase one to the board for approval. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, so I'm sorry, so this is the roofs, but the HVAC project where the number one is, and to the right of that, the offices and the admin, that's where that project is going to focus on. And the board just approved that. It was the last meeting or 2 meetings ago.
2 meetings. I
Yeah.
believe. We actually have a pre-con meeting on Wednesday.
Oh, okay, good. So anyway, so getting back to the topic of this slide, this is the roof project. So there's three main roofs that are in need of replacement. Offices is number one, and the lab area, number two, and three is the high service pump area. That project will likely be done in phases in order to minimize disturbance around the building. But we'll be taking that for construction phase approval next year. Okay, now we get into our wastewater projects. This slide is the annual and the city-funded projects. Similar to the water side, we have our annual projects, which is a collection of different areas, mobile equipment, general improvements, other equipment, SCADA upgrades, that sort of thing. The indenture report improvements, similar to water. This is work that's driven by the annual indenture report. We're making progress. We're taking care of the backlog, but we're not as far along as the progress at the water plant. There's just a lot more at Klein's Island that needs to be done every year. Master plan studies. There's a current master plan being done right now, and the next master plan will be in 2029 per release every 5 years. Next project, the manhole inspection and sealing project. That project is ongoing. That's projected to be a $1 million spend per year, and that's driven by regulatory. Act 537 analysis, that's a planning project. That's just for additional planning effort, city funded. And then the last item is miscellaneous planning, financial and legal reviews. Those 2 projects should drop off the capital plan in a year or 2.
Chuck, on the manhole inspection program, you said
Yes.
$1 million a year, but it's got 2 million. Are we catching up on that one?
Correct. Yeah. Okay, that's the annual projects, what it's comprised of. Mobile equipment, other equipment would be like pumps, valves, instrumentation, collection system, like development driven collection system work, capital management, distribution and collections, sanitary sewer main replacements and rehab, smaller projects at the Klein's Island that we don't break out at the plan in the plan that we call general improvements, any PennDOT relocations and SCADA upgrades. So here begins our large projects. At the top, similar to the water plant, we're doing a redundant power supply project to bring another feed in from a separate substation. That project will be constructed in 2027 after we finish our substation project, which is the next project on the list.
And Chuck, I'm sorry, back on the redundant water, power supply. Didn't we just do that, already?
For water.
Wastewater treatment plant? No?
Oh, no, not for clients. We did a substation #2 project a number of years ago,
Okay.
but we didn't do a redundant power project.
I think you're thinking of the water plant.
No.
No?
The water plant, but I thought maybe it was associated with the
Yeah,
substation.
Maybe
number
thought it
two.
was in conjunction with that project, but no, that's a need, that's definitely a resiliency enhancement down there. So the substation project, that's in construction right now. There's some really long lead time items that we're just kind of waiting for. And that project will be done in 2026. Final settling tank rehab, these are the 4 original final clarifiers that are in need of mechanical. It's primarily a mechanical rehab project to replace the rotating mechanisms, the sludge scraper, the drives, the bridges, that they're all in poor condition. It's a master plan project, and that will be in construction next year and should be complete early 2026. The primary digester sludge feed line replacement, this project is a master plan project as well, and it's intended to replace the old ductile iron, unlined ductile iron sludge piping system with new glass-lined piping system that will decrease the friction of the internal friction factor of the pipe and allow us to convey a thicker sludge to the digesters that will optimize the volume of the digesters. So that project will be constructed by the end of next year. The next one is wet weather improvements phase 1. So that's the project where we are upgrading the main and auxiliary pump stations and the intermediate pump station to be able to provide a 100 MGD wet weather treatment capacity at the plant. There's also a tertiary bypass component of this, which is essentially a bypass around the rock media, sending the effluent from the trickling filter, the plastic media trickling filter, directly to the final clarifiers instead of through the rock media. So you have 2 parallel biological treatment trains during wet weather conditions, like over, I think it's over like 85 or 87 MGD that we would activate that. So that project is in, we just had design kickoff for final design kickoff about a week and a half ago. So that project will be designed by the end of next year and in bid phase probably at the end of the year, and then construction the following 2 years. It's a big project. It involves a lot of coordination with operations, a lot of phasing issues, a very important project. And the last one on this list is what we call the SRP, the inflow and infiltration source reduction plan. So this assumes a $5 million per year spend. You see a higher figure there than $5 million. There's some catch up there. So that's a big project. It's Act 537 driven. This is a picture of the substation, the switchgear. That this is in construction now, but there's no active construction around the site because we're waiting for equipment. Some of this stuff takes about a year in order to get from when they approve shop drawings.
Just looking at that, is there any work done on the dike to assess its structural capacity for major floods? They do deteriorate over time and periodically need to be inspected to avoid holes from animals and trees and stuff like that.
I believe
Is there
it
in
is.
the annual plan or?
So the dike that you're seeing behind is not actually part of the Army Corps dike. So yes, but we are required to inspect it yearly. The US Army Corps comes out, they inspect it. We're also supposed to do visual checks as well. That includes, like you said, groundhog holes. We have a exterminator come in to take care of that. We do a lot of like brush hogging and plant removal from all along the dike as well.
So they're technically responsible for it, but we're kind of overseeing the maintenance.
Correct, yes.
Making sure that nothing's deteriorating.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're required to maintain it. And then if anything does happen, and just for example, 2 years ago, there was some damage on the other side of the river. And the US Army Corps came in to repair that damage because it's been maintained appropriately.
Okay. None of it's on our dime.
Yeah. Besides the maintenance.
Thank you.
Here's a picture of the main pump station and the auxiliary pump station as part of the wet weather capacity enhancement project. Last year in the capital plan, I had 3 separate projects. And this project is basically a consolidation of those 3. The one was main and auxiliary pump station upgrade. Then there was intermediate pump station upgrade. Then there was a third, it was called tertiary bypass wet weather enhancement. So we bundled all those together for economy of scale, and because they're all intended to achieve the same objective. So that's what we call the project now. Phase 1. So here's a picture of the 4 final clarifiers, 1 through 4. The original final clarifiers, I think they were originally built in the 1930s. These are going to be rehab, mechanical rehab, and also some concrete rehab where required. One of those tanks is used for leachate storage and equalization. Actually, it would be that the tank in the, I think the lower left, right? That's the leachate.
No, on the bottom right picture, the bottom right hand,
Okay.
that's the
Yeah,
leachate.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't take a picture of the leachate.
Right. Okay, so we have quite a few new projects, new wastewater projects in this year's Allentown Division Capital Plan. The first project is facilities improvements. This project is intended to upgrade office areas and locker rooms. Right now, there's a shortage of in particular women's locker room space, and we have some restrooms in really poor condition, offices in really poor condition, and there's renovations required. The scope of those renovations have not been hammered out yet. The master plan is looking at improvements and optimizing space utilization. So that project is in planning phase. And we're looking at construction in a couple of years of whatever the scope of renovations we can determine, and it will be value engineered. The next project, another new one. This is a rehab of the plastic media trickling filters. So basically, these 4 tanks contain this plastic media. Each piece is probably roughly a cubic yard, and the media has all sorts of internal, like little dividers and little sections to increase the surface area for bacteria, for this biological slime to attach itself to and provide the biological treatment through the depth of the tank. The media is over 50 years old. We have reason to believe that the media is in poor condition. So what we want to do is we want to do a thorough condition assessment of one of the tanks, and included in the capital plan is the assumption that we're going to have to replace media in one of the tanks. So right now, we don't know the condition of the media on the bottom layers of the tank. We know the top layer is pretty much shot from UVs, and the other layers may be in poor shape as well. We have yet to determine. So we're gonna, like I said, we'll do the condition assessment, and then plan assumes the rehab of the first one. The next project is driven by our proposed load shift of solids. This is kind of getting into Phil's realm from the pretreatment plant. And this involves process enhancement in digestion and process handling at Klein's Island due to potential load shift from the pretreatment plant to down there, conveyance of additional solids. The next project is Park Pump Station Force Main. So as part of the Act 537, to expand the wet weather treatment capacity of Klein's Island beyond 100 MGD, one of the concepts, one of the alternatives is to extend Park Pump Station Force Main from its present tie-in with the interceptor all the way to Klein's Island, which would require a new headworks at Klein's Island and a new pump station. So that's what this project includes: a new headworks, like new screens, and a new pump station, in order to bring about 21 MGD directly to Klein's Island instead of putting it into the interceptor. The next project is for the force main extension, the actual extension of the existing force main from its present location where it ties into the interceptor to inside Klein's Island. Next one, this is phase 2 of the wet weather improvements. This is also Act 537 driven. This would be to expand the wet weather treatment capacity of Klein's Island from the proposed 100 MGD, which is what we would achieve with the phase 1 improvements, to 132 MGD. And that would be constructed toward the end of this capital planning period, 2028 to 2030. So it would go beyond the capital plan. And the last new project, this is the KISS, the Klein's Island Sewer System Relief Interceptor. This is a regulatory driven project, would be constructed like the phase 2 improvements toward the end of this capital planning period between 2028 and 2030. And this is for a new parallel interceptor from, I'm going to turn to you, Phil.
Yeah, just upstream of Park Pump Station, all the way down to Klein's Island, just the route. Again, the board approved the amendment. Must have been in the spring to do the alignment study. The alignment study is just about wrapped up.
Yeah, I know this shows as a new project, and you see there's budget. It says 2024. There's budget for it. That's how the budget became available for it. There was an amendment. So here's a picture of the trickling filter towers. They were built in the early 70s to provide additional biological treatment. So you get similar to, if you were ever at the plant and saw the acres of rock media in these big rectangular box that's at grade. This does basically the same thing. It was added to enhance the level of treatment. And this is a slide that presented different alternatives to the Park Pump Station Force Main extension. I believe the recommended one was alternative 1C, Phil.
Yeah,
The top in the blue there. So it's to take the Park Pump Station Force Main where it ties into the interceptor and continue it to inside the plant site. Thankfully, there's one project that fell off the plan. And that's the boiler replacement project, which will be finished this year. So I hope to be adding a lot more of those projects in the future. And now we'll get into the financials, and I'll turn it over to Ed.
Okay. So just looking at what we're going to spend in total, I'm talking about 325 million plus in total capital spending. I think Liesl did already show you that at one time, last year was 193 million rounded. So we're obviously taking a giant step forward from where we've been. In terms of the breakdown, you got 149 million plus coming from the water side. Another $174 million coming from wastewater, and then almost $2 million in allocated administrative projects, which we'll talk about when we do suburban. Just looking at the funding sources for that $325 million worth of projects, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. We're going to take about $126 million that would come from operating sides, current rates, and operating reserves and project reserves. In terms of some of the grants that are coming on, we have an ARPA grant coming from the city of Allentown worth $850,000. Just general reimbursement of projects, mostly on the wastewater side, is another $350,000. We put $30 million worth of grants coming for lead service line replacement. Going by, that would have been 10 million a year for 3 years, and in the last 2 years we are hedging our bet that maybe not getting a grant. In terms of PFAS compliance, we're expecting to have a grant of $10 million to fund some of that activity, but not all of it. $4 million of grants related to I&I/source reduction across the entire wastewater realm. We did borrow money in 2024. We borrowed $55 million. That will cover $47 million worth of projects in the next 2 years. And then as the last borrowing will be $107.3 million worth of funding that will borrow in 2027. That will cover 2027, 8, and 29. So there are your major funding sources for a lot of capital.
So we have $325 million planned to spend in 5 years. $125 million comes from our operation.
Which we'll call the operating side.
154 million, 55 million comes from borrowing.
That is correct.
And then the rest is grants.
Yes, provided that we get all we expect to get. I mean, there's also potential upside on grants too. I mean, we started trying to stay in the middle of the road, saying we expect to get some, we didn't get too crazy. But there could be some plus side on that, but yes. Basically, yeah, when I was looking at this number the first time, I was flat, I was sitting down.
And that's 537 comes.
Yes, that's 537. This only includes a couple of the 537 projects as they talked about. That will, basically we would be starting sooner than later. It's not the full realm. So obviously when we do the 537, there will be every possibility that there will be more required.
Yeah, I do want to hedge that a little bit because within the 5-year period, my understanding is that we did include everything in this plan that we expect to be in the 537 during that 5-year period.
Everything we're doing is not going to be wasted. It's part of the 530.
It's part of the 530. It's really what extends beyond 2029 that's not defined here, but I believe, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, everything that's in the 537 is in here.
For the city division.
For the city division.
City division, yes.
We'll see more next time for suburban, but yeah, that's why we wanted to include it all this time because projects are taking off now.
Yeah, they're gonna start cutting ground now, so that's the breakdown of the funding. Obviously, we will be talking about borrowing in the future, as we did, so. In terms of new borrowing, mostly what we're borrowing for would be the non-grant portion of the lead service line replacement worth $45 million. Again, water filtration PFAS compliance upgrade, about $10 million. And then in terms of the Kleins Island wastewater treatment plant projects and wet weather capacity enhancement projects, it'll be 52.3 million. So that will cover the $107.3 million that we expect to undertake in 2027. This is the cash flow, a lot of numbers here. Just looking at the user charges and jumping down to the bottom a little bit, you see the rate increases from the lease position, which includes the 2.5% plus CPI. Will be 6.3, 5.5, 5.255, and 5. If you look at the other non-operating revenues, you kind of leave them the same. Other non-operating revenues are basically holding steady as well. Operating expenses, we don't really pump up for volume, although we adjusted a little bit for additional volume in terms of manpower requirements as we move along with some of the stuff, and also inflation of, I think we used 3.8, it dropped it to 3, and all the way down to 2.5 in the last 2 years, which I think reflects what the experts are saying. The lease and other payments are by lease agreement. As you look at the debt service for the plan period, you're starting off with 16.7 million. That will go all the way up to 20.8 million in 2029. In terms of what our current debt structure is, and then adding the new debt to it will add another $7 million at the end of year 2029 to our debt picture. We did talk about the grants altogether. It's 15 million in first year, 12.5 in second, and 17.4 in 2027. And we really haven't gone into any prediction on 2028 or 9. Again, 107 coming on board in 2027. So when you look at the unrestricted cash balance, keep in mind that 43.5 also has some project money in there of about 30 million. So the operating side only would be about 13 million. You can see that we're using up in 2026, we're using up that remainder of the $55 million. So what's sitting there at 14.9 is true operating cash. Same thing, the pattern repeats itself in 2027. We're going to borrow $107 million. So we'll have about $57 million of project money still left in 27. 28, we'll have about 30 million, and then that will go away when we use it up in 2029. I guess where I'm getting at is you look at these cash on hand from the operating side, we're at 191, it kind of climbs all the way to 230 and then kind of settles back down to 217, but it's certainly well within our 180 day that we really target. So I was happy that we could make that happen. Debt service coverage ratio is at 2.16, goes up to 2.37. It will drop when we take on some additional borrowing in 2027. It does, but at the end of the day, we're above covenant requirement of 1.20, so we could make that work too.
So minimum rate increase is 9% for next 5 years.
I'm sorry, this is the question.
Minimum rate increase is 9%.
It averages, she has a slide on that. It's in a neighborhood of 8 to 10%, I mean, on average. Yes?
That's not including some of the other projects come from 537.
It is. All of the
All of them
537 projects are in here.
For next 5 years.
Yes, for the next 5 years.
Yes.
So that does raise the question of affordability and
Yes.
what we're going to do about that. Spending time thinking about this.
Great. Want me to cover you with?
I'll go through
Okay.
this one, the rate projection. I mean, I think we kind of dabbling in this conversation anyway, but to go through the components of the rate, we have the city base rates that are included in the lease, those increase by 2.5 plus CPI each year. So we're expecting between 5 and 6%. It depends on inflation. It could be higher, it could be lower. And then we have capital cost recovery charges and change of law fees that are also kind of by formula through the lease and through collaboration with the city. With all the projects that we're expecting in the next 5 years, adding those capital cost recovery charges to the lease rates, we're expecting a total rate impact of 8 to 10% annually. That is in line with our projection from last year. It's just maybe a little more focused now that we have the 537 projects in the plan. And we have the full 5 years of lead service line projects in the plan. And we're trying to give a realistic picture of grant availability. So just to look at what that means today, an average residential water and sewer bill is about $915 per year. And that's based on average usage of 13,000 gallons. We see these rate increases and achieve all the targets in the capital plan in terms of project timing. Then in 2029, that rate increase would be approximately $1,100 per year. So, or the average bill would climb to that level. So it's a significant increase over a 5-year time period. Do believe that it is still within kind of the regional realm or continuum of rates, water and sewer rates that we see in communities across Lehigh Valley and Pennsylvania, but certainly beginning to push the envelope in terms of affordability. So
my calculations are correct. That's $3.84 per day.
okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Who goes buys a cup of coffee?
So one of the things that we have talked about with this board, and I think important to keep at top of mind, are strategies related to affordability. And $1,400 a year is a lot if we were to bill it all at once. It's less if we bill it quarterly. It's even less if you bill it monthly. So we want to have some conversations about different ways to bill customers that would be more advantageous or support household budgeting. Also looking at how we administer our customer grant program for customer assistance and other partnerships that we have for providing customer support. And I think the renewed higher level of focus on grants as well as that's the upside for us. What we put in the plan is what we think is achievable based on the level of effort putting in today. But if we increase that effort and look for alternative sources, we think that there is likely some additional grant sources out there that we could pursue. In the packet that those who are here in person have and the board members will receive, also be posted on our website after this meeting. You'll see the project detail sheets have been revised somewhat. It's a new format and a new process that AJ and Chuck have been working on through this process. But one item on there of interest that relates to this conversation, there's a notation on every project about whether it's grant eligible. And it's a yes, no, or to be determined. And at this point, those indications are really just an indication of which projects we think there might be a program that would tie to that project. So there's a lot of projects that are listed as yes or to be determined beyond the lead service line project and the PFAS project, because we do think there's other funding out there that we should be pursuing.
So if you try to frame that rate increase in different ways, maybe people can digest it. What percent of that, of 8 to 10%, is the mandated regulatory things that we have to do? Otherwise, we're going to shut down. There will be no water and sewer.
Yeah, I don't have that
Okay.
breakdown for you, but I will say we've met internally several times about this capital plan and said, what's in here that is discretionary?
Sure.
And there's just not much. I think the the trap is things that are discretionary are the asset management related things that really still need to be done. Your main replacements or even the trickling filter upgrades of new project. Those are not being mandated necessarily to be done except for what's required in the lease. But if you don't do them, you have the consequence and cost down the line. But there's so much in our plan this time around and growing over the past couple of years that are regulatory driven. $75 million for lead service line replacements. We were required to do that. The PFAS treatment, we're required to do that. All of the Act 537 projects, we're required to do those. So there's not a lot of discretion within the plan. Just a little recap. I think we've covered most of these items already. This year, we're seeing roughly 70% increase from the prior plan, or it's $133 million from last year's 5-year plan to this year's 5-year plan. And primary drivers are what we talked about, the inclusion of the new projects from the regional sewer plan. That's about almost $80 million of the increases just for those projects being added. We also expanded the scope of the projects for lead service lines and PFAS treatment this time, as we've gained a little more clarity of what those costs will be. So those two pieces together account for almost all of the major increase in this year's capital plan. We have the new borrowing that Ed reviewed, the $107 million. We are able to continue to achieve our performance targets in terms of financial metrics with that borrowing. So that is a good thing. However, we acknowledge the rate impact of 8 to 10% per year is significant. And we need to develop some strategies on how to do that in a supportive way with our customers. We talked about potential upside. If more grant funding is awarded, we're more aggressive about pursue grants. And finally, as I mentioned at the outset, the future reveal or the rollout of the Act 537 plan will include a more detailed plan-specific financial analysis. So that could change not necessarily the project numbers, but how it impacts rates when we look at how projects are shared or the sequence and timing of those projects. So that could refine our plan numbers a little bit. But I wouldn't expect them to change by a lot based on that, just a bit of a refinement on the financial.
When you review this with your stakeholders, are you going to actually just send it out, or are you going to give a presentation?
So typically, we have the city on the call, city representatives on the call, they're hearing the presentation and they receive it, and they're very much involved in all of the review of all of these major projects. So I think that, we have a close communication and collaboration with them on the plan. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission typically requests us to be present and give a brief overview, and they may have questions on some projects, but typically Lehigh Valley Planning Commission is simply looking to be sure that our planned projects are consistent with the comprehensive plan for the region. The Lehigh County Board of Commissioners may or may not want a presentation. I was with them earlier this spring, and it's kind of at their discretion. If they'd like to have me on their agenda, I'm happy to do that and suggest to the county that I'll do that. And then everything else is more by mail or posting on our website and soliciting feedback. I will say though, that for the regional sewer plan projects, the municipalities that are involved are extremely aware of all of the projects and the costs. So this is not a surprise to them. So just to kind of close this piece, we do have, as I mentioned at the outset, we have the suburban division plan and the administrative projects that we'll present 2 weeks from now. And then our draft plan will be complete and ready to submit to all agencies for review. And we'll do a 30-day review process. And and bring back any refinements to you in our.
So is Ted flying or is he driving? Sorry, Ted.
That's all right.
Any board discussion on the capital plan? That was a lot to digest.
So. I'm sure. Any other questions? Anybody online? Any questions?
No, thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Jen. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. Good job, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, now, next on the agenda, under water, we have the 2024 water meter replacements project. Seeking approval, salmon documents within our board package, digital board packet pages 6 to 8.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I'm going to be presenting this on behalf of Amy Kunkel, who is on vacation. So this is an annual project where we replace meters in Suburban that are old or no longer properly reporting or just not reporting. This project, we prioritized with the customer care, 1,530 residential meters. These are all residential in our central Lehigh division primarily. Meters are a range of 24 to 36 years old. They've reached the end of their service lives and need to be replaced. So we deal with Core and Main. They are our professional service contract provider recommended for this project. They are on CoStars. They are the regional supplier of the meter equipment that we use in Suburban. So this is through CoStars. We received pricing, and the price we received is $492,524, and that includes furnish and install. So we think it's a decent price. It's a fair price, and we would like to proceed with purchasing these meters, and construction would be completed by the first half of 2025. So what I'm asking for today is approval of a capital project authorization in the amount of $532,524, which includes a general construction contract with Core and Main for $492,524. And then there's cash allotments in there for internal staff time and contingencies of $20,000 each. So I'll entertain any questions anybody has.
Any more questions?
Physically go to any place to read the meter anymore?
Maybe you're better to comment on that, how we read the meters. Some locations, yes.
For the most part, we're reading with a radio antenna and truck. And Chris, I'm not sure how many manuals there are still out there, but there's probably a handful.
There's a handful, but it's all drive-by. It's like Pac-Man on screen as you're driving through the city streets. Earlier discussion, there was mention of the new meters and the cellular upgrade that we were talking about, the AMR project that Chuck mentioned. I know a couple of years ago, we talked about towers and space and all that stuff, and those days are kind of long gone by. The newer meters have newer technology that would allow us for a more real-time reading. This project does not cover that, though, to be clear, but the AMR project that Chuck talked about in the beginning of the meeting does.
Yeah, and there's a similar project you'll see when I present the Suburban Capital Plan in 2 weeks. It's a cloud-based meter reading system. It's cellular instead of the tower, trying to find towers to hang antenna on and transmitters.
Is cellular coverage as reliable and widespread as drive-bys?
Yes.
Are you have blind spots?
I'll say no. We've done several cellular studies throughout our serving area for multiple different projects, and where we are situated in Lehigh Valley, we're pretty hot with cell service at this point.
Other board questions?
Have you considered after you replace somebody's old one. You look at the, the meters, how many gallons was used versus, when the new meters, is there an increase or decrease? I just want to see the reliability of the old meter.
Yeah,
Are they charging the customer more?
it's a good point. I don't know that we've quantified that necessarily. I mean, I would think we would increase our revenue because there's some that
Yeah, I
do
don't
not
know.
report and they have to be estimated. But
We have studied that, kind of on a spot check or like small data sets to look at that in the past, and have not seen like full scale increases in water revenue, but it's more about the reliability or the accuracy to the customer, I think, where you get.
Sure.
Yeah.
How about the remote capability of the customer monitoring their own water usage and that? I have a device called Flume on my meter, and I can see the minute by minute consumption of water on my phone.
So part of Chuck's project, the AMR project, comes with a dashboard and I call them end users, customers, to be able to go in, track usage overnight, right? That's how you can find that you have a running toilet or you're going on vacation. You can set up alerts where if you see extensive flow over time, so.
I'll get an alert if it thinks that I've got a leak somewhere too. So, I mean, the technology is out there just to wrap that around the meter base.
Yeah, and we have two separate systems here. The City of Allentown and Suburban Division have two separate metering systems. So there's some conversation about some way to meld them together. So there's a single kind of source of data for everybody to be determined at this point.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, you heard the details of the recommendation for approval from Chuck, so I don't need to repeat everything. Is there a motion, a second?
I'll make that motion. This is Norma.
Okay, Norma?
I'll second it, Brian. Mark?
Okay, thanks, Mark, for the second. All right, motion made and seconded. Are there any questions by anybody? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is under wastewater. We have industrial pretreatment plant master plan. It is a discussion topic, and we did see that electronically in advance.
Yeah, so we have another presentation, fairly lengthy presentation, but before I bring the presentation up, I want to just kind of put some context around what we wanted to present today. The last time we had board discussion about the industrial pretreatment plant, we kind of reviewed some value engineering work that was being done and the various options that were available for upgrade, and let the board know that we really felt it would be important to get stakeholder input on the decision-making process. So what we have today is a review of the stakeholder process that was conducted, and both Ted and Amir were participants in that process. So I really appreciate the board's participation there. And we have some recommendations from the stakeholder panel to share with. So again, this is just a recap of the stakeholder advisory panel process, as well as the recommendations that came from that process. The pretreatment plant, as you all are aware, was built in the 1980s, and it was built by the county. And essentially, the county had a vision that if they built this facility, that food and beverage manufacturers would locate here. And this was an incentive for industrial growth to happen in Lehigh County. And that is exactly what happened. In 2009, the county transferred the facility to LCA debt-free, and we've been operating it since that time. Basics of how it works without getting into the technical details. Essentially, we have industries located in Western Lehigh County that discharge high-strength waste, primarily high organic load from food and beverage manufacturers. And that load is flows through the pretreatment plant. The pretreatment plant knocks down the load to domestic strength or less, and then puts that flow back into the pipe for discharge all the way down to Klein's Island for final treatment and discharge. So in between the pretreatment plant and Klein's Island are all the municipal systems that add flow and load back to the system. So by the time the flows get to Klein's Island, the plant has some significant loading it needs to treat from that load, but we're removing the load from the industries at the top end of the system at the pretreatment plant. We've been discussing really three major challenges at the facility today. Number one is that the plant is at the end of its useful life and major replacements are required, and that's very expensive to do. At the same time, there's very limited, or really, we should say no capacity available in that facility for new industrial growth. So trying to address both of the problems at the same time, and what are the solutions and alternatives. Probably the most complicated or challenging piece of it is that there's no real financial mechanism in place today to capture capital costs. So that's part of the reason why we are where we are in terms of the plant condition, but also how difficult it is to develop a solution is partly because we don't have a financial structure or rate structure in place that allows us to capture capital costs. So we have to solve all three of these challenges with the solution. Just to dig into that financial challenge a little bit more, as you may recall from our prior discussion, Boston Beer is really our only direct customer to the pretreatment plant. They pay based on a contract and a way that we establish rates for Boston Beer has rate caps and various, contractual limitations to it. The other industries that use the plant are indirect customers, so we don't bill them directly. We do some pass through of charges through to the municipalities that then collect for those industries. The waste hauler program provides a significant amount of revenue, but the revenue, again, is not tied to a specific cost structure. So it's market-based. What can we charge? What's the level that we can charge those waste haulers to attract them to come here? And if we're not competitive in our rates, then those waste haulers have other places where they could potentially take their waste stream. So it needs to be market-driven. And then we have the other compounding factor is that the waste that comes to pretreatment is intermingled or interspersed with other waste. So all the residential communities and small commercial warehouses, all the development in Western Lehigh County, the waste all goes into the same pipe to the pretreatment plant. So we're treating a high volume of water, not all of it that actually requires pretreatment service. And so it does not all create revenue for the facility. That makes sense. So we embarked on this conversation with the stakeholders and tried to keep it somewhat simple in terms of the options that are on the table, and essentially saying to the stakeholder group that we're at a crossroads, that we either need to invest in the pretreatment plant now and find some way to share the capital costs, or the potential we need to consider is to decommission the plant and have the industries pre-treat on site, which is an industry standard, and it's probably more uncommon to have a municipally run industrial pretreatment facility. So decommissioning the plant is an option we have to look at. And the stakeholders were really deeply involved in the conversation around these, and certainly wondering, is there some other option that is in between here that might work? So we tried to present to the stakeholders that we're at the beginning stages of the solution, developing the solution. We're trying to make some broad decisions, get community feedback, and then we'll take that feedback to finalize the plan and get into the approval process. The approval process is complicated for the pretreatment plant because we, as Lehigh County Authority, are not the only decision makers for this facility. certainly we own it and we will fund the improvements. However, the existing industrial customers have a huge stake in the decision, and they also would be participating financially. So what they may decide to do at their facility will have a huge impact on what we might decide is best for this pretreatment plant. The other piece is the municipalities within the Kleins Island sewer system. If we were to do a project that has a regional cost sharing element to it, the municipalities would have to agree to incorporate that piece into their sewer rates, which is not something that LCA can dictate. So, you know, pretty broad and complicated decision-making process. And that's really why we wanted to have as much stakeholder input as we could to get to a decision that we think everyone can agree upon or support. Stakeholders on the screen are those that participated in the process. We had the five major industries that use the plant participating. We had some municipalities, the county, regional organizations like LVPC and LEDC. We also had some developer participation, which was great. And also some state agencies as well as local legislators. So a pretty broad mix of stakeholders coming to the table for these conversations. At the very first meeting of that panel, we talked about four main decision criteria and agreed that these are the four main things we wanted to achieve with pretreatment plant solution. First is to address the current industry's needs for pretreatment. We want to support the region's desired economic development goals. We had a lot of discussion about what does that actually mean. We need the solution to be financially sustainable and make sense financially for our customers. And then, of course, ensuring continued protection of the environment. So the stakeholder process is kind of outlined here on this timeline. I'm not going to go through every detail that we presented to the stakeholder panel, but you can see some of the key points. We did a lot of foundational work early on to understand the decision criteria and the problem at hand. We spent time looking at key issues around regional growth and economic impacts of this decision. We spent a lot of time hearing from the industries directly of what they are looking for in the solution, and then working toward a potential recommendation for the state to consider. And that's kind of really good today. I'll say that the key thing that we talked the most about, I think, was this idea of you know, how much risk you want to place in terms of investment risk. So in the past, in the 70s and 80s, the county took that risk and said, if we build this pretreatment facility, food and beverage manufacturers will come here. And they felt reasonably assured that that would happen. And that is what happened. And so we're at this point now of saying, is that still hold true? Is that still the case today? If we invest in this regionally and put a regional investment into this facility, will we receive the benefit of that in terms of new growth, new food and beverage manufacturing, or expanded industrial growth in our region? And if we believe that to be true, how do we fund it? And I would say, Amir and Ted, since you participated, you can share a different perspective, but I feel like that's the core issue that we struggled with as a stakeholder group.
Can you all hear?
Go ahead, Ted.
This is Ted. Can you hear me? I'm on Route 81 in Virginia. So
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, this was a very thorough examination of the options that I met. And people on the staff are really doing great all segments of the community. And but in any event, yeah, she nailed it here. This is, how much risk do we take, and how that there has been kind of a general Go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. We caught about 2/3 of that. You're breaking up a little bit, but
Yeah, I'm in a bad spot here. Yeah, so I should probably keep my mouth shut.
so I'll just go through a couple of the things related to the regional economy and those types of topics that we focused on. We talked about like who's here now and what are the economic contributions of the current customers and what's the potential for growth. We shared this slide that AECOM provided for us on the economic benefit. The businesses that are using the pretreatment plant today employ almost 3,000 workers, which is significant, and they're generating almost $250 million in annual earnings. So a significant economic impact of having those industries here. And then beyond just the facilities that are using the pretreatment plant, there's a lot of ancillary services and businesses that are located here as a result of those industries being here, like the logistics and the cold storage. Even the bottled water facilities to some extent are here because Lehigh Valley is known for being a good place for water and food and beverage type related industry. So we look at just some of the other aspects in terms of wages that are provided and how we compare to other portions of the nation in terms of this industry sector. These are good paying jobs. These are important jobs for our region. And so there's a general feeling among the stakeholder group that it's important to preserve this and important for the region to have capacity to grow this sector if that's possible. And we looked a little bit at where people are coming from to work here. And the vast majority of people who work in those industries do not live directly in that community. So just kind of puts home that point that it benefits beyond the township where the facility is located. People who live in Allentown, live in the Poconos, live in Philadelphia, wherever they're living, coming to this region to work in these facilities is really important as well. And then, of course, I think we're all well aware of the distribution, logistics, and access that our region provides. So that's a kind of another reason that we have such great, great number of these kinds of industries locating here. And then we looked at this map, which I think was, we're having this discussion about it's great to work in the Lehigh Valley, and this is a great location for industry to locate here. There's lots of great things that support industries in our region. And we look at a map of the build out and what's actually available in terms of vacant industrial parcels in the service area directly related to the pretreatment plant. And what this map shows is all of the light blue parcels are parcels that are zoned light industrial and already built. And then the green parcels are those that are zoned for zoned industrial but vacant. And that was a little bit of an eye-opener. Where the red star is where the pretreatment plant is. So this is the service area, the drainage area to the pretreatment plant. And while there is some capacity for growth in the industrial growth with these green parcels, there's not as much as I think everyone thought there would be. And the fact that there's so much built in here already tells a little bit of a story about the capacity for additional growth. So again, we're just at this conversation, and we talked about it at every meeting that we had, is with the build out that's happened, is the concept still valid that we build this and take the risk, the investment risk, and that will attract new industry to locate here? Is that really what makes sense? And if so, how do we pay for it? So we had a number of I think, key points that we solidified around with the stakeholder panel. I've summarized them down to 4. First one is conversation with the Lehigh Valley Economic Development folks that really the region's economic growth is going to come from our existing customers first. And so supporting our existing customers is what's really going to drive economic growth and vitality here. And that became I think a focus of some of the conversation. So speaking of our current industries, we had a panel discussion during one of the meetings with the 5 industries that use this facility. And without going into all of their details, I just wanted to display that there was a continuum of points of view from each of the 5 industries. Yes, Brian.
Did all of the major users of our system participate? Are these
These are the 5.
There are 5 and they all.
Yeah. There are other smaller industries that use the plant, but we're really trying to solve the problem for these 5. Yeah. And so we had 3 industries that say they really feel a regional solution is important for them, for their business, and really want to see something happen at a regional level. We had one that said we really prefer the idea of going to and handling their pretreatment needs independently because it gives them more control of the outcome and the cost and all of that. And then the Boston Beer is still working on their analysis. It's a very big decision for them because they are the largest user, and they have expressed a lot of interest in ensuring that the solution is the best thing for the region, and that may kind of shape where they're going with it, but it's not 100% clear for them. So the next key discovery from the panel is that the industries want to stay and grow, but this pretreatment plant decision actually impacts each of them a little differently. And so we have to think about the solution in more of a customized way, potentially for the industries, and addressing their needs a little bit more kind of in a customized way.
It was interesting. The second from the last one on the previous chart favors on-site pretreatment.
Yes.
That's the only one though.
Yeah, well, we are not sure about Boston Beer. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Third piece is that we spent a lot of time and fielded a lot of questions from the panel about how did this happen, and the financial structure seems to be broken. It's really not working in terms of bringing in the revenue to pay for capital or bringing in tapping fees to pay for future upgrades. And we want to be sure that the next phase of this facility addresses those and makes sure that the plant is sustainable from a financial perspective as well as, of course, operationally. And then the last piece is about the waste hauler program, and we had some discussion. It wasn't a key focus of the panel process, but discussion that the waste hauler program does provide an important service. It impacts small businesses and restaurants significantly, and that we should try to preserve that offering. And we also talked about the fact that it does provide financial value to the operation because we're able to generate some good revenue from that program. So we want to incorporate a solution that incorporates waste haulers.
There's also a benefit to the digestion processes are not from that what's coming in, and actually enhances our ability to process the waste. So we ought to really be thinking about that as well, not just the financial drawback, but also the financial impact of benefiting the bugs.
I think that's an it depends issue, because depending on the treatment technology we're using for the industrial waste, the waste hauler mix may or may not be a good fit for that technology. But AJ, you could kind of expand on that if you like.
Sure, yeah, it's a good comment. So we looked at that carefully to see which haulers could go to our anaerobic process and some, like Lisa said, would be ideal, call it candy for the process. It works really well, but then others would be like death to the process. So those we want to avoid. But we still have our existing digesters that can handle that. So we've kind of looked at a sort of a hybrid process that could handle the industries that want to come, but also handle the haulers. Most of the haulers would end up going to the digesters directly. So there's,
Because they have a beneficial.
well, I mean, they because they can be treated there and because, yeah, they could generate gas there. I don't know that there's like an enhancement function. It's just,
You can treat it.
we can treat it, right?
And we can generate revenue from it.
Yeah.
That helps the overall cost impact. It's got to be a win-win, both operationally and financially.
I was wondering if there was more benefits to us by bringing that in from a processing standpoint, not just the financial.
I will volunteer one comment. You can generate more gas with accepting grease, putting grease directly into the digesters, provided that you screen it first. If part of the future of the plant is like cogen to create energy for use at the plant or exporting to the grid, grease can enhance digester performance.
Hey, Lisa, it's Jeff. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I'm not sure that if the pretreatment plant takes a lot of septage or not, but if it does, and that's a current low cost alternative for all the folks in Lehigh County that have on-site systems, I think that should also be considered for their sewage on-site needs. It's just a comment on my part.
Yeah, that gets into just the regional service approach that, there's a need for it and the facility can handle it. So rather than having these small haulers having to go far away and increase their costs and increase their, the air pollution, all that kind of stuff related to their operation, let's come up with a way to allow them to continue to come here.
Yep, agreed. Thank you.
So we have a few more slides to go talking about the different options that we reviewed. And before we get into those, just to highlight a couple things on this slide, the stakeholder group talked a lot about the regional approach, and it was a really interesting and dynamic conversation where the stakeholders, I think, very strongly felt that a regional approach is necessary and the plant should not be shut down if we can avoid it because it provides regional benefit. It supports industrial growth. However, there is not a clear source of funding for that on a regional basis. So there may be some grants that are available, but they're unlikely to cover the full scope of the project. And if there's not a current customer to pay for a cost because it's speculative, we're investing in the region, there is not a source of funding for that investment that we could identify. We had a lot of discussion with the municipalities, somewhat outside of the stakeholder panel discussion, about incorporating pretreatment costs into the regional sewer rates, your residential or commercial regular sewer rates. Not a lot of support there from the municipalities. We talked about tax increment financing, which would be a way for a school district or a county or a municipality to fund the project through a tax offset kind of approach, but finding a taxing entity to partner with is not did not happen. So really, there's this sense that we need to have a regional approach, but there's not a financial way to make that happen. So we kind of get into this idea, let's focus on the existing industries and the services that we need to provide, and how do we do that with the options that are available. So with that being said, there were 4 main options that we reviewed. with the panel, and I'm gonna go through them rather quickly because I think you can see where this is going. First of all, the first traditional master plan approach that Jacobs presented now a year and a half ago, I think it was, $267 million. I think without getting into the details of what that is, we can discount that one because of cost. The second option, we called it the balanced regional approach. And that essentially was a new type of treatment process, focusing on the anaerobic treatment process, building in capacity for new industries, and doing some modifications to the existing plant to accommodate that growth. The regional cost share out of the $171 million, the regional cost share was $77 million. And again, without having a source of funding for that regional cost share, that option came off the table. Just skipping down to option 4, decommissioning the plant. I think it became clear in the discussion that that's not an option for all the existing customers. And so therefore it doesn't work. We took that one off the table as well. So we ended up with this third option, the industry-focused approach. And at the first pass, we had a solution outlined where all 5 of those industries that we mentioned earlier would come into this new facility, and their waste would be segregated with pump stations and pipes. So we have those 5 industries coming into this facility. All the other waste that is currently coming to the plant would just bypass the plant because it doesn't need pretreatment. And we would build a smaller plant just for those 5 industries and address growth later. $93 million, it's a lot of money. And certainly when we think about the industries and their own choices that they can make from a business perspective, this option may or may not work for all of them. And again, I just put up the five industries that we spoke with, where we see 3 of them are favoring the regional solution, 1 of them favoring on-site treatment, and possibly are still working on their preferences. So with this feedback, we really were able to kind of narrow it down into new option. We're calling it 3A because it's close to 3, but it's just a narrowed down project where 2 of the industries, we're assuming Boston Beer and Ocean Spray, would treat on site. And so we're creating a new smaller facility for the 3 industries that really say they want it. And again, all of the other waste would bypass the pretreatment plant, and we create some capacity for the waste hauler program to continue. And that becomes a much smaller project that we think is potentially affordable, or at least workable in terms of developing new relationships with those industries. Go ahead.
So you're basically shutting down the plant, but you're building a separate plant to handle what function does the existing facility have under that 3A?
Can you answer that again?
Yeah. So most of the existing plant will go away. Like I was saying before, the digesters we're going to retain, some of the solids handling will retain, but the aerobic process, the aeration system, the high purity oxygen system, that all goes away. So once everybody has built their on-site treatment, and once our new 3A is online, that all can just be shut off.
So we were retaining the solids handling and the digestion and some of maybe the clarifiers,
Possibly,
potentially the tankage, potentially for flow equalization.
So when we build it and they will come is gone.
Yeah, so I have a slide on this later, but we had a lot of conversation at the very last stakeholder meeting about what's the trigger for adding on. So, or how do we add on? And we're going to build something that we think is somewhat modular in terms of being able to add a new unit to it to increase or add a block of new capacity to the plant in the future. But what's the trigger for doing that, and and when and who pays for that? think are all things that we still need to work through.
So there's very limited light industrial, so light industrial locations, the green blobs on the map. And we already approached the county for money, but they're not interested in that, correct? If the money, they could provide money to some other industry, can you expand this concept of a new facility to take their high strength waste? In other words, could they encourage some other company to come in that would also use this new facility to treatment? Will you have the capacity to do that in your estimates? Or would you do it at a module on the back end of it to handle theirs as well?
Yeah, so what is proposed here in this 3A is a facility that will treat the 3 who are here and have some capacity for the hauler program. How
Nothing else?
but nothing else. I mean, within some, probably, I don't know how much each unit treats, so there might be some excess capacity available for new growth or for growth within the 3 industries that are here. But remember also that the 3 industries that we're talking about would be segregated with their own pump stations and pipeline to the facility. So
At their cost?
So it's included in this cost, which is their cost for the most part. They will share in this cost of this project. But if a new industry were to locate here in one of those green locations on that map, they would have to evaluate, is it cost effective for them to build a pipeline to be treated at our pretreatment plant? Or is it more cost effective for them to pre-treat on site like some of the others are going to be doing? So, and I'll say just anecdotally from the conversations that we have somewhat regularly with industries that are looking at our region, if they're in the food and beverage business, they know what their on-site pretreatment costs are going to be, and they're expecting to do that. So it's more of a, surprise to hear that it might be an option for them to have LCA manage their pretreatment service for them. But if they're looking to buy one of those green properties or, expand in some way, generally they have an idea of what their own costs will be. So they have something to compare our costs to.
Like something popped up for a channel, then they would, if they disappeared. Nope.
Yeah. Chris, did you catch that message?
I don't see it either.
Just came and went, that's all. Okay.
Okay. I know Sean had to leave, so it might have been him signing off. Okay, so last but not least, yes, that's Sean saying that he has to jump, which I appreciate. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
The stakeholder panel did have some recommendations to share with the board, which I think we're kind of getting the gist of it already through this presentation. I should say that the stakeholder documentation of this recommendation was submitted to the panel about 10 days ago, and we have a review process where, if they have any feedback or comments or changes to it, we'll incorporate that as well, and then we'll get you an actual write-up report from the process. But essentially, the stakeholder panel has some key questions and concepts that they would like LCA to consider in this decision-making process. First, the customized industry approach, which we sort of talked about, that option 3A. The concept here is that that's an appropriate way to go and to give the current industries a choice to participate or opt out. It is their choice regardless. We don't have to give them the choice. They have the choice to participate or opt out. And then we refine our engineering and our financial analyses accordingly. And then along with that, we would want to optimize the waste hauler program and ensure operational and financial benefit from that program being part of the solution. And then finally, the rate setting process, the tapping fees, the customer relationships need to be redefined. So future capital costs are captured and the facility is financially sustainable.
What happens if those 5 industries want to pre-treat on their own?
All 5 of them?
All 5. What happens to the waste haulers and all that? Do we still build a plant?
We haven't looked at that specifically. I think we would need to look very carefully at is it worth it to do a very small, type facility that only
I'm
receives.
wondering. I mean, because we don't know what those other 3 would be. You're talking about 3 plants
Right.
now. I mean, 3 companies to build a plant for, basically.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking, and I remember some of the years when you showed how many years each of those plants had been here,
Mhm.
they were here less than like Boston Beer, that kind of thing. Are they committed to staying here?
Yeah, that's a key question and something we need to nail down before we can commit dollars to it. Certainly, the financing of a project like this is complicated because we can't show revenue in the same way that we do for the other bond issues that Ed puts out, where we have the stable customer base and we can show the revenues with this degree of certainty. So what we would anticipate is, as we're moving toward a true decision-making process, that we would need to have individual agreements with those 3 entities in terms of their financial commitment and the length of their financial commitment. So that would allow us to fund the project. And those conversations we've been working toward and having a lot of one-on-one as well as group conversations with the industries. That we've been struggling to narrow it down to a true solution that they can then react to. So that's kind of where we are now with the 3A. We have some true numbers to share with those 3 and start working toward commitments.
Lisa, if I add just a comment for us to think about for a decision from LCA board perspective. I think 20, 30 years ago, a business model was developed that if you make a PTP, a pre-treatment plant, the industry would come. And that business model has worked. And I think according to your numbers that you presented, we are a unicorn because there's no other facility like us serving the food and beverage industry. So given the fact that Ocean Spray is gone, Boston Beer, most likely they're going to go their own because of the cost. And those 3 companies that we're working with, they don't have a space, they need help and so on and so forth. Should we consider that, is this a business model that we want to take on as a LCA, that we build and operate a small facility for these 3, given the fact all the capital cost recovery, those guys might shut down and volume go up and down. We support them to build and so on and so forth, but we decide that this is not a business model that we want to be in. I don't know the answer, but I'm just thinking about it. Since we are in the transition point, is this the time for us to make a decision and simplify our business model?
Yeah, I think those are decisions we're going to have to make, and certainly getting more direct feedback and commitments from the industries will probably shape the final solution and recommendation. Our concern has been that we've heard very clearly from at least 2 of the industries that their being here in Lehigh Valley is at risk if we can't help them solve this problem in some way, because they don't own their properties and they don't have space to put a facility, they don't have approvals to put a facility on site. And so this becomes a really critical decision for them in terms of their longevity here in Lehigh Valley. we certainly don't want to be the reason that we lose a major employer. But how we think about the future and the expansion of this facility, I think is a strategic question, and, you know, how we put those agreements together is extremely important as well. A lot to consider. And the waste haulers, yeah.
Let me just add, have you looked at the price elasticity for the oil and fat, whatever? How much money be leaving on the table? Is that room?
On the for the hauler program? Yes, we have some preliminary data on that. We think that we do have some room to grow the revenues on that side.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, this kind of dovetails right into some of your comments as well. The panel had a lot of open questions about how we plan for future needs, and recognizing that we're proposing to size this facility specifically for the current needs. How do we grow? How do we add on? What's the cost for a new industry to add on to this facility if that's the best choice? How can we plan ahead so that when a new industry is looking at this area, we have the right information to give them to help them with the decision-making process? And what's the trigger point for future expansion? These are just questions that the panel would like LCA to consider and build into our plan for this facility. And so I think in your question about like the business model here, we could have a conversation with this board and say, well, our future business model is that pretreatment is not part of our service offering. And so what we do now is what we need to do, but we're not going to offer it for future. That could be part of our decision-making process. But we need to be clear about that. So when new industries are locating here, we're able to give them a straight answer, which has been difficult lately because depends on what your loads are and what your flows are, and can we squeeze it into the current plant or not? I don't know. A lot of uncertainty around that. And I think the last piece is just an easy one, that grants are good, we should pursue them, and the panel will support that effort. And the second item is really, I think, an interesting twist that we've heard from some stakeholders, that the industries, even if they're going to do their own on-site pretreatment facilities, that we should support them seeking grants for those as well, because it is a cost that we're asking them to bear, and it's something new that they weren't expecting. So we want to support all of the industries. So where we are right now, we have a draft recommendation that's out to the panel for them to review, continuing to talk with the industries and try to get a refined level of commitment from them on their approach. Presentation today to the LCA board. We'll move into more conversation with the municipalities and finalize that stakeholder document for sharing. And then most importantly, the push on this schedule has been so we can incorporate this decision into the broader regional sewer plan. We think this is a really important decision for our region for a variety of reasons, and really wanting to support our region thriving. So we want to send that message out and get some information out on our website and potentially through other outreach efforts as well. And I think that's probably a good place to end. I have more slides about the regional sewer plan, but we just spent a lot of time talking about that with the capital plan. I think this board is well aware of how this fits into the overall regional sewer plan. I just wanted to kind of end with the stakeholder panel. Was I think a really robust and lively conversation, very helpful to this process. And we would like those stakeholders to stay engaged as we start to go out to municipalities and present the Act 537 plan and all of the rate impacts and all of the projects that we're gonna do, that those stakeholders, because they know more now about our plans, can help us with that message and can help us gain some support for it as we get into that later this year. So I think from that aspect, it's been very helpful as well.
So just a question which is in my mind. If we decide we're gonna shut down the pretreatment plant, what capital cost impact it would have in our 537 plan 5 years down the road? I'm just saying, we just went through the capital, assuming that PTP is gonna be in place, right? But if 3 years down the road, that is not in place, and they are treating their stuff sending to us, there's gonna be an increased load, I assume, in the Kleins Island facility.
So there's a couple different ways to answer the question. I think the one piece we haven't talked about at all is the cost to decommission this plant. That's a capital cost as well. That's a different conversation. If the pretreatment plant is decommissioned, or even those industries that are potentially going to handle they're going to decide that now that they're going to treat on site, we will need to give them pretreatment limits that they will need to meet. So they will lower their loads from whatever they are now to something that approximates domestic strength waste. So we can predict the loads that would come to Kleins Island, whether they're pre-treating on site now or in the future. If we decommission the plant, we would have to then require those industries to pre-treat at that time. So we have that loading analysis somewhat done. Some of the solids processing projects that Chuck reviewed and Phil chimed in on during the capital plan discussion are about having Kleins Island being ready to handle a higher load. But there are some improvements that would be needed there. And there's probably some other scenarios that we would have to run if we were going to totally shut down the pretreatment plant, being unsure what all of the industries would be able to achieve with their on-site stuff. AJ, you've looked at this quite a bit in more detail.
That's what I would have said.
Okay. Well, I'd like to commend you and the staff for doing an excellent job on reaching out to stakeholders and getting them involved and dealing with all this. So good job, well done. And just it is what it is. Just keep moving forward to come to the right solution. Anything else from any of the board members? All right, let's move on to the next project. All right, Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant, final clarifier project seeking approval. Green documents in our board package, digital board packet, pages 9 to 16.
Okay, if you guys are still awake.
Hey.
Of course we are.
Matt Dorner is going to present this for this project to be installed at the Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant, which is located in the New Tripoli area. Plant was built in the 70s. It was upgraded in the early 2000s by the Lynn Township Municipal Authority, which has been disbanded. We acquired the plant in 2012. So this project is to add a second final clarifier. There's a very small final clarifier there now. It's 20 foot in diameter. It has not been taken out of service since it was built. And also we've noticed the plant has trended, the loads have trended up. In recent years, the peak flows have trended, and the plant struggles to perform during peak flow periods. So the addition of a second final clarifier will help with treatment performance and resiliency. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to present the nuts and bolts of this project.
Thank you, Chuck. And like Chuck said, currently the Lehigh Lynn Township plant has a flow of 67,000 gallons per day average and a permitted capacity of 80,000 gallons per day. And obviously there's one clarifier which provides no redundancy. It can't be shut down. If something goes wrong with it, it would be a large problem. The two pumps that are dedicated to that clarifier are essentially reaching the end of their useful life and need to be replaced as well. So what the plan here is to add another 20-foot diameter concrete clarifier, add 3 new return activated sludge pumps, which would provide a backup in that area as well. It would improve the wet weather flow treatment capacity and really just allow us to do any work on either one of the clarifiers when necessary, which, you know, right now we have our fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong. It's not a good situation. This will be a large improvement. And in general, the schedule for this project would be to have the concrete clarifier installed by the end of this year. And by July of next year, have the entire project, all the pumping and piping and electrical completed. For the bidding, we have 2 contracts, a general construction contract and an electrical contract. For the general construction, we got 6 bids, very competitive. JEV was the low bidder. They've been doing work for us and we've had very good success with them. So we certainly have no issues with them. Their total price was $1,241,000, which was very near the estimated from our engineer, $1,233,000. So we certainly recommend that contract be awarded to JEV. For the electrical, we only had 1 bidder, Ace Electric. They are currently doing a project for us, the Upper Western Lehigh Pump Station. So we have some knowledge of their work, and that project came in significantly lower than what was estimated. I talked with the engineer, and what originally the electrical contractor was going to be doing the trenching for the new wiring. But along the way, we changed it, and the general contractor has that job, and apparently the estimator did not change that from the original estimate. We did talk with Ace Electric. They are certainly confident in the work and looking forward to it. So we don't believe there's any reason, knowing what we know now, that we feel that's a good price, and we would recommend award to Ace Electric for the electrical contract.
Okay, any questions? All right, so we have before us a request for approval, Suburban Division, Lynn Township Wastewater Treatment Plant. New final clarifier project construction phase, total capital for construction authorization of $1,425,136. It includes a general construction contract with JEV Construction LLC for $1,241,000 and an electrical contract with Ace Electrical Incorporated for $47,936 and a professional services authorization construction phase engineering services with CHA Consulting for $76,200. So I have a motion and a second.
I'll make that motion. This is Norma.
Motion by Norma, seconded by Linda. Yes?
Sure.
Okay, seconded by Linda. All right, any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we have, next on the agenda is monthly project updates, information. That's the first board meeting of the month. Digital board packet pages 17 to 25. The August 2024 report is attached to our packet.
All right. Just a couple of highlights for our next meeting. There's a lot on the agenda. You can see all the projects that are listed for the 8/26 meeting. There's quite a few of them. A couple that I wanted to highlight in particular. First of all, we're going to have round 2 with the capital plan and the suburban division. and look forward to that presentation. We also have been working with King Spry on an updated or a new resolution that we want to bring to the board. This will be just for discussion at the next meeting. So we'll bring a draft resolution to the board, calling it an omnibus resolution related to delegation of duties. And the point of that resolution will be to consolidate the many historical resolutions that we've had in place since 1966 into one resolution that covers all of the delegated duties. So that I think should be a robust and interesting conversation. Lots of other projects, and we're anxiously awaiting the results from the bid opening for the lead service line project. So that'll be one of the highlights next time as well. Lots of other good information in the report. If there's any questions, we can try to answer them.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, moving on then, we do not do number 7 and number 8 on our agenda. Staff comments? Solicitor comments?
No comments.
Saving it all for next time. Public comments on any topics whatsoever.
No, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny. Any board member comments? All right, then this meeting will be adjourned. We will be going into executive session at, let's make it 20 after 2. And that's for the purpose of 2 potential litigation topics and 1 property acquisition. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Long discussion this time. Thank you.